Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the luxurious offices of Montgomery Enterprises, every detail exuded excellence. The walls were covered in polished mahogany panels, the white marble floors reflected the light from the crystal chandeliers, and every houseplant seemed chosen for its perfection. But behind this impeccable facade lurked a far less glamorous world, that of human relationships. Vanessa Montgomery, CEO and heiress of the family business, walked slowly through the corridors, observing her employees with a mixture of pride and concern. Aged 42, elegant, meticulously coiffed, and always dressed in perfectly tailored suits, she had inherited her family's attention to detail, but also a particular sensitivity to injustice and hypocrisy. For several weeks, Vanessa had noticed troubling behaviors, employees belittling interns, looking down on contractors, and openly mocking their colleagues. Each act of disdain made her uncomfortable, and she knew that if she didn't do something, this culture of arrogance would eventually corrode the company. It was then that a bold idea germinated in his mind: pretend to be a cleaning lady to observe her employees in their true colors. She didn't want reports or filtered notes, she wanted to see the truth, raw and whole. She called her trusted assistant, Lydia Harper, a methodical and loyal young woman, and confided her plan. "Lydia, I'm going to disguise myself as an employee. I want to see who truly respects others, who acts out of spite or arrogance when no one is looking. I need to know the true heart of my team." Lydia, impressed but aware of the stakes, agreed, "It's risky, but I understand. You'll discover a lot of things you never see from your office." Vanessa then went to a specialized workshop to make a simple, gray, and functional uniform that would make her unrecognizable. She tied her hair back in a ponytail, removed her jewelry and makeup, and looked at herself in the mirror. The reflection that reflected her calm but determined gaze was nothing like the usual headmistress. She was a simple cleaning lady, ready to face the unknown. The next morning, she walked through the doors of Montgomery Enterprises with her bucket and mop, invisible to those who saw her every day. In Vanessa's eyes shone a single certainty: she was going to discover the true face of her employees, and no one would escape unscathed. What she didn't yet know was that this experience would not only reveal the contempt and arrogance of some, but also highlight the rare righteous souls, and forever change the dynamics of the company. The morning was crisp and bright when Vanessa Montgomery first walked through the doors of Montgomery Enterprises in her new role, a simple housekeeper. Her gray uniform was plain, her hair tied back in a ponytail, no jewelry, no perfume. At first glance, she looked nothing like the manager everyone feared and respected. She took a deep breath, felt the weight of the bucket in her hands, and entered the main hall. The employees, absorbed in their phones and conversations, didn't notice her. She moved cautiously, like a discreet shadow, but every movement was observed in her attentive mind. She analyzed gestures, expressions, whispers, attitudes. From her first steps, she was confronted with the harsh reality of her plan. Mark Reynolds, the head of the reception, a tall and arrogant man, looked down on her and said, "Hey you. Are you new here? Then show me you know how to do your job. These floors aren't going to clean themselves." Vanessa nodded politely and set to work, methodically sweeping the floor without a word. Inside, a dull anger was boiling, but she controlled it. She had to remain invisible to observe the truth. In the hallway, Susan Parker, the head secretary, looked at her with a frown and said in a low voice to a colleague, "Look at this outfit, it looks like it came from the pioneer days." Vanessa felt her cheeks heat up, but she didn't react. She mentally noted every word, every gesture. As she passed by the cafeteria, a clumsy intern dropped a tray of coffee, and an older employee burst out laughing. "Well, she definitely has no experience." Vanessa paused for a moment to observe the scene. Laughter echoed through the room, cruel and condescending. She remembered her own beginnings, the humiliations she had overcome to get to where she was today. A silent determination took root within her. Every injustice she observed would be noted and recalled at the appropriate time. As she continued her work, sweeping, mopping, and moving objects, she saw behaviors that shocked her further: employees talking secretly to mock contractors, contemptuous looks thrown at those who passed by, and orders given in an authoritarian manner to subordinates without the slightest respect. Vanessa felt the weight of responsibility weighing on her shoulders. She wasn't there to punish immediately, but to understand. She had to see everyone's true colors, discover who truly respected others, and especially who believed themselves to be above all else. As the day drew to a close, Vanessa retreated to a small storage room to jot down her first impressions. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the force of what she had seen. She had witnessed mockery, contempt, and arrogance, but also a few discreet gestures of kindness that did not go unnoticed by her attentive gaze. This first day had been a success, she thought. She had gotten what she wanted, a pure, raw glimpse into the internal culture. And, in the back of her mind, one thought lingered: soon, each of them will see that the real director is much more than just a polite face behind a desk. The next morning, Vanessa returned to Montgomery Enterprises with even stronger determination. Bucket and mop in hand, she walked through the lobby as if she belonged in this invisible universe. But this time, she was greeted by the indifference mixed with arrogance of some of the employees. As soon as she stepped into the main hallway, Mark Reynolds, the head of reception, looked at her contemptuously. "Well, are you still here? You don't look like you know what you're doing. Pick up those papers off the floor, and quickly." Vanessa complied without replying, feeling a seething inner anger. Every order, every word of disdain fueled her desire to reveal the truth one day. As she passed by the cafeteria, she witnessed a scene that shocked her deeply. Susan Parker, the head secretary, dropped a tray of coffee next to her and burst out into cruel laughter. "Be careful, little one. This isn't your world." Vanessa silently swept the floor. But she mentally noted every word, every sneer, every contemptuous look. She knew these humiliations reflected the true character of her colleagues. A little further on, Angela Dixon, a shy young intern, accidentally knocked over a filing cabinet. The surrounding employees burst out laughing. One of them, Greg Simmons, "This. You really should learn to walk without breaking everything you touch." Vanessa felt her chest tighten. She knew that pain, being humiliated for a minor mistake. She placed her hand on the bucket and forced herself to continue her work, observing the scene in silence, noting everyone's reactions. But that wasn't all. Vanessa quickly discovered that some employees mocked her even when she wasn't there. Cruel whispers, mocking looks, sneers from behind doors and desks, all part of the invisible reality of Montgomery Enterprises. At the end of the morning, she was summoned to clean up an office that had been left in disarray. Mark Reynolds followed her closely, making sarcastic comments. "Do you really think you can handle this?" Vanessa knelt to pick up the papers, her face impassive, but her mind was already calculating how each behavior would one day be confronted with the truth. As she left the office, she passed by Lydia Harper, her trusted assistant, who gave her a small, discreet, compassionate nod. Vanessa smiled inwardly. Lydia had always been fair and attentive, and this gesture, small to some, was worth silent encouragement to her. The day ended with Vanessa returning to the storage room to take detailed notes. Every humiliation, every mockery, every sarcasm would be recorded for when the truth came out. This day had been more revealing than the previous one. Vanessa now knew how much some employees believed themselves to be superior, and how contempt could be expressed without fear. The battle hadn't yet begun, but she knew she had the most powerful weapons: observation, patience, and truth. On the third day, Vanessa entered Montgomery Enterprises with heightened concentration. Every step was calculated, every gesture precise. She had to remain invisible, while observing the most revealing behaviors of her employees. As soon as she entered the main hall, she sensed a subtle change in the atmosphere. The employees seemed to be getting used to her presence, but their contempt was still present. Mark Reynolds was quick to spot her and, this time, was even more cruel. "You know, you could at least learn how to hold a broom properly. It looks like you've never done that in your life." Vanessa just nodded, gritting her teeth inwardly as she approached the stairs to sweep the steps. In the office corridor, Vanessa overheard a group of technicians in deep conversation. "Have you seen the news? It looks like it came straight out of a 50s movie. Seriously, Who hires women like that anymore? Their laughter erupted, cruel and unrestrained. Vanessa noted every name, every inflection of voice. She knew that when the moment came, every word would carry weight. But what shocked her most was what she discovered in the break room. Susan Parker, already cruel to her, allowed herself a gesture that bordered on physical malice. She deliberately slid a tray onto the floor, right in front of Vanessa, splashing coffee onto a pile of documents that she had started to clean. "Oh. Sorry, little one." "Well, not really, Susan said, bursting into laughter. Vanessa breathed deeply, controlling her anger. Every humiliation strengthened her resolve. She knew that revenge would lie not in an impulsive act, but in revealing the truth at the exact moment. As she continued her work, she observed more subtle but equally revealing behaviors. Angela Dixon, the intern, was once again the victim of sarcasm, but this time Vanessa noticed that she was trying to keep her head high despite the laughter and mockery. A mixture of respect and pity arose in Vanessa for the young woman. As the morning progressed, Vanessa realized that some employees were only being cruel out of fear or habit. Laughter and sarcasm often masked deep insecurity. This helped her distinguish between those who were genuinely contemptuous and those who were just putting on an act. At the end of the day, Vanessa returned to the small storage room. She put down her bucket, wiped her brow, and dutifully noted every humiliation and reaction she had observed. Every word, every gesture, every expression of contempt was recorded in her mind like invisible evidence. This third day confirmed what she had suspected: Montgomery Enterprises wasn't just a demanding workplace, but a microcosm where contempt and arrogance manifested themselves as soon as one thought they weren't being observed. Vanessa now knew she had information capable of completely transforming the dynamics of her company. On the fourth day, Vanessa rose before dawn, her mind focused on her mission. She knew that every interaction, every word whispered behind her back, could reveal the true nature of her staff. In her crisp gray uniform, she walked through the doors of Montgomery Enterprises, ready to face not just isolated humiliations, but collective ridicule. From the main lobby, she sensed a different atmosphere. Employees were gathered around the coffee machine and photocopiers, exchanging knowing glances and whispering. Vanessa quickly realized that today, she would be the unwitting center of their amusement. Mark Reynolds, the head of reception, seemed almost delighted to see him. "Hey, our new mascot is here," he said, a cruel smile on his lips. A group of employees burst out laughing, and Vanessa felt a mixture of anger and resignation wash over her. She simply bowed slightly and continued on her way. But that was only the beginning. In the archive room, she was surrounded by several colleagues who mimed exaggerated cleaning gestures, mocking her posture and the way she held the broom. "Be careful not to fall with all that equipment," joked Greg Simmons, an arrogant technician. "Oh, she'll end up breaking her back before noon," added another, bursting into laughter. Vanessa watched the reactions carefully. Some employees laughed out of fear of appearing weak, others out of pure contempt. The cruelest, like Susan Parker, made sure everyone saw their arrogance. Vanessa noted every name, every laugh, every satisfied smile. She knew this behavior would have to be confronted publicly one day. In the cafeteria, shy intern Angela Dixon accidentally knocked over a tray of cutlery. This time, several employees openly mocked her. Vanessa quietly moved closer and placed a comforting hand on Angela's shoulder. The girl looked up in surprise, and a faint smile appeared on her face. It was a small gesture, but to Vanessa, it represented a glimmer of dignity in an environment filled with arrogance. As the day progressed, Vanessa noticed an interesting phenomenon. Some employees, like Lydia Harper, her loyal assistant, remained discreet but attentively observed the scenes of contempt. Vanessa understood that there were righteous people in the company, capable of kindness even in the face of arrogance. As the day drew to a close, Vanessa returned to the storage room to write down her observations. The collective humiliations, the mockery, the cruel laughter, everything was recorded with precision. She knew these moments would be crucial in her future revelation. This day had strengthened his determination. The truth had to come out. She now saw more clearly who deserved to be trusted and who needed to face their own demons. The true transformation of Montgomery Enterprises would soon begin, and every humiliation she witnessed was a step toward that silent justice. On the fifth day, Vanessa rose with silent resolve. She knew that the week was drawing to a close, and that her role as a housekeeper exposed her to even more cruel tests from the employees, especially from Mark Reynolds, the head of reception, who seemed to take an unhealthy pleasure in putting her down. As soon as she arrived, Mark spotted her and his cruel smile widened. "Ah, there you are, the new star," he called out loud, attracting everyone's attention. He pointed to a pile of heavy, dusty boxes. "I want you to carry all this down to the basement. And hurry, or I'll do it myself, but that would be too bad for you, wouldn't it?" Vanessa nodded calmly, but inside, her anger was simmering. Every humiliation was stored in her mind as evidence for when the truth came out. She took a deep breath and began moving the boxes, feeling the physical and symbolic weight of the ordeal Mark had imposed on her. As she descended to the basement, she was watched by a group of colleagues who whispered and laughed at every possible misstep. "Watch out, she'll fall with all that," one of them called out, causing general laughter. Vanessa kept her head high, walking with caution and determination. Arriving in the basement, she realized that Mark had arranged the boxes in an unstable, almost dangerous manner. Several times, she felt the precarious balance of the piles threaten to collapse. Susan Parker, already cruel in the previous days, added, "You should be grateful that someone is helping you stay on your feet." Vanessa didn't reply, but with each remark, her mind calculated the best way to turn this humiliation into a memorable lesson. For several hours, she moved boxes, wiped off dust, and silently observed the employees' reactions. Some laughed heartily, others seemed uncomfortable, as if they sensed their arrogance would one day be confronted. Vanessa mentally noted every name and every behavior, knowing that these details would be valuable. By the end of the ordeal, Vanessa was physically exhausted but more determined than ever. She knew that Mark and the other employees didn't understand the magnitude of what they had done. Their contempt, arrogance, and mockery fueled a truth they would soon have to face. Back in the small storage room, Vanessa sat down, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and wrote in her notebook. Mark Reynolds, obvious arrogance, contempt for subordinates, constant pursuit of dominance. Susan Parker, deliberate mockery, cruel pleasure in humiliating. Greg Simmons, complicit, but influenced by authority. This day had been one of the most revealing so far. Vanessa now understood the extent of the cruelty that lurked behind the polite smiles and official titles. And deep inside, one thought persisted: the moment of truth is approaching. Each of these humiliators will pay, not with violence, but by the revelation of what they really are. On the sixth day, Vanessa walked through the doors of Montgomery Enterprises with a keen eye for detail. After days of humiliation and observing cruel behavior, she now wanted to identify those who, despite the pressure and arrogance of others, demonstrated kindness and respect. From the hall, she saw Lydia Harper, her loyal assistant, who was passing by. Without making any ostentatious gestures, Lydia gave her a small, discreet nod of recognition and a sympathetic smile. Vanessa felt a comforting warmth. Lydia was proof that humanity persisted even in this toxic environment. As she walked towards the cafeteria, Vanessa observed Angela Dixon, the young intern, who had already shown courage and dignity in the face of ridicule. Angela carefully put away documents that had fallen to the floor, despite the laughter and mocking glances around her. Vanessa allowed herself an inward smile. This kind of behavior revealed a quiet courage and strength of character that Vanessa deeply respected. As the morning progressed, Vanessa noted other subtle but significant details. Greg Simmons, although arrogant in front of the others, sometimes refrained from participating in the most mocking cruel. Jessica Landon, an employee administrative, sometimes offered help to those who were ignored or humiliated, discreetly, without being noticed. These small actions, almost invisible to others, stood in stark contrast to the cruelty and contempt she had observed in the previous days. Vanessa understood that the company was not entirely corrupted by arrogance. There were employees capable of kindness and respect, but they were often drowned in the surrounding toxic culture. One incident particularly caught her attention. Angela Dixon accidentally dropped a flower pot in the hallway. Before anyone could make fun of her, Jessica Landon approached discreetly and helped the intern clean up the mess, without seeking to attract attention. Vanessa made a mental note of this gesture. She promised herself that, when the revelation came, these acts of kindness would be recognized and rewarded. At the end of the day, Vanessa returned to her usual refuge, the small storage room. She took a moment to reflect on what she had seen. The humiliations and ridicule revealed the darker sides of some employees, but the quiet gestures of kindness showed that all was not lost. She wrote in her notebook, "The righteous exist, but they are silent. Their loyalty and humanity must be brought to light. These observations will be essential to balancing the justice I will one day dispense." This day had given Vanessa new hope. She now understood that her mission was not only to expose cruelty, but also to highlight and protect those who had shown respect and dignity. The final confrontation was approaching, and she knew exactly how each piece of the puzzle would fit together. By day 7, Vanessa knew she could no longer simply observe small, isolated instances of humiliation. True cruelty often revealed itself in group dynamics, and she was ready to study these interactions closely. Upon arrival, she noticed a gathering near the archives room. Mark Reynolds, smiling with unusual arrogance, was surrounded by several employees, Susan Parker, Greg Simmons, and a few other accomplices. All seemed to be waiting for another opportunity to mock the new, cleaning lady. Without losing her composure, Vanessa walked over to the pile of documents to be filed. Mark, seeing her approach, burst out laughing. "Oh, look who's coming. Ready for the Monday morning torture workshop?" The other employees laughed heartily, joining him in observing his every move. Vanessa felt the weight of their gazes on her, each cruel smile and whisper adding to the tension. Susan Parker made a particularly humiliating gesture. She moved a bucket filled with water right in front of Vanessa, forcing her to bend down to avoid it spilling. "Be careful you don't get wet yourself, little one," Susan sneered. Vanessa, impassive, mopped the floor and continued her work, but her mind recorded every detail. She noted not only the humiliations, but also the active complicity of those who remained silent and observed, confirming the invisible hierarchy of arrogance within the company. Meanwhile, she noticed discreet gestures of solidarity. Angela Dixon silently helped a clumsy intern who was about to trip, and Jessica Landon intervened to prevent a vase from falling, without attracting the attention of the crowd. These contrasting actions were precious to Vanessa. They showed that even in adversity and cruelty, some employees remained humane and respectful. After several hours, the tension reached a peak when Mark asked Vanessa to carry a heavy stack of files to the executive office. The other employees crowded behind her, laughing at her efforts and commenting on every possible misstep. Vanessa, silent but determined, forced herself to move forward with dignity, feeling that each humiliation brought her closer to her future revelation. At the end of the day, Vanessa returned to her small storage room, exhausted but more determined than ever. She noted every interaction, every humiliation, and every act of kindness, knowing that this mixture of cruelty and loyalty would define the moment when the truth came out. This day had been the most revealing so far. Vanessa understood not only the cruelty of some, but also how it manifested in groups, amplified by the silent complicity of witnesses. The final revelation would not only be a lesson to the arrogant, but also a tribute to those who had kept their humanity intact. On the 8th day, Vanessa entered Montgomery Enterprises with unwavering focus. After a week of observation, humiliation, and analysis, she knew the moment of confrontation was approaching. Every cruel gesture, every mockery, every sneer of disdain had been carefully recorded in her notebook. She first passed through the main hall, silently sweeping the floor, while her colleagues continued their usual routines, unaware that the truth was getting closer. Mark Reynolds, true to form, made a sarcastic comment. "Hey, the cleaning star is here. Ready for your daily parade?" Vanessa smiled inwardly. Every mockery, every humiliation he inflicted on her would now be a testament to his arrogance and contempt. During the morning, Vanessa focused on two main objectives. Clearly identify the worst behaviors. She listed the humiliations orchestrated by Mark, Susan Parker, and Greg Simmons, as well as the knowing laughter or the passivity of others. Highlighting invisible allies, Lydia Harper, Angela Dixon and Jessica Landon, through their discretion and their humanity, would play a key role in the future confrontation. She began mentally planning the reveal, a town hall meeting in the conference room, where she would appear in her true capacity as director. The shock, shame, and psychological impact would be amplified by the notes and evidence accumulated throughout the week. While observing her colleagues, Vanessa allowed herself a few little experiments. She accidentally left a bucket of water lying around nearby from the reception to see who would intervene. No one moved, except Angela Dixon, who discreetly pushed him away, showing her humanity. She lightly knocked over a tray in the cafeteria to see the reactions. Laughter and mockery erupted, confirming the attitudes of those she was going to have to confront. Each incident reinforced her strategy: the cruelest would be publicly exposed, while the righteous would receive the recognition they deserved. Vanessa knew that the revelation should not be impulsive, it had to be precisely orchestrated so that the lesson would be etched in everyone's memory. At the end of the day, she returned to her usual refuge, her small storage room, and reread her notes. The collective humiliations, the sarcasm, the cruel gestures, and the acts of quiet kindness now formed a complete plan. She knew exactly how and when to act. This day marked the turning point. Vanessa was no longer a mere observer. She was ready to transform the company, reveal the truth and put everyone in their place, while rewarding those who had retained their dignity and humanity. On the 9th day, Vanessa rose with calm but relentless determination. Everything was ready. After a week of careful observation and notes, she knew the moment of the final confrontation had arrived. She walked through the doors of Montgomery Enterprises in her cleaning lady's uniform, as usual. But this time, she headed straight for the conference room, where she had asked to gather all the employees for a special meeting. Murmurs and curious glances erupted. No one yet suspected what was about to happen. As soon as everyone was present, Vanessa placed her bucket and mop in a corner, standing straight and silent. Then, in a calm but firm voice, she said, "Thank you all for being here. I know some of you have seen me this week in a different capacity, and I think it's time to clarify some things." She slowly removed her wig and glasses, and dropped her uniform, revealing her impeccable professional attire, jewelry, and penetrating gaze. The whispers quickly turned to cries of surprise and shock. "I'm Vanessa Montgomery, CEO and heir to this company," she announced. Faces paled, jaws clenched, and the mocking laughter of the previous days turned into awkward silence. Mark Reynolds was the first to react, his voice trembling. You are." "Yes, it is," Vanessa interrupted. "And everything I've observed this week will be taken into account. Your mockery, your humiliation, your sarcasm, none of it will go unpunished." She mentally scrolled through her notes, then continued. "Susan Parker, Greg Simmons, your arrogance and cruelty have been noticed by everyone, including those you thought were invisible." The two employees exchanged startled glances, feeling for the first time the gravity of their actions. Then Vanessa turned to those who had acted kindly. "Angela Dixon, Lydia Harper, Jessica Landon, you have shown what respect and humanity mean in a difficult environment. You deserve to be recognized and protected." The eyes of the cruel employees lowered, while those of the righteous shone with pride and relief. The entire room felt the force of truth and the silent justice that Vanessa had orchestrated. Finally, Vanessa concludes. This experiment wasn't just about punishment. It was about revealing the true colors of everyone. I hope that from now on, respect, humanity, and dignity will become the foundations of Montgomery Enterprises. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Every humiliation inflicted, every mockery, every cruel smile turned against those who had orchestrated them. And those who had been righteous were honored without even having to ask. Vanessa left the room with sovereign calm, leaving behind a lesson engraved in everyone's memory: truth and dignity always triumph in the end. Days after the revelation, Montgomery Enterprises was no longer the same. The hallways that had been filled with cruel laughter and silent mockery now echoed with attentive respect and a newfound collaboration. Employees had come to understand that appearances spoke volumes about the true worth of individuals and that humility and dignity carried far more weight than arrogance. Mark Reynolds, once arrogant and domineering, had been called back by Vanessa for a private interview. His attitude had changed, shock and shame had given way to a form of deep reflection. He had offered a sincere apology to his colleagues and committed to changing his behavior. His transformation wasn't instantaneous, but it had begun. Susan Parker and Greg Simmons were also going through a similar process. Their past mockery could no longer be ignored, and they had to acknowledge their mistakes. Vanessa, in her wisdom, did not seek to humiliate them further, but offered them the opportunity for redemption. Those who had been cruel now had a chance to rebuild their dignity. At the same time, fair and caring employees were rewarded. Angela Dixon, Lydia Harper and Jessica Landon received promotions and increased responsibilities, showing that integrity and kindness had their place, even in a competitive work environment. Their colleagues now looked at them with admiration and respect, taking their attitude as an example. Vanessa, watching the changes from her desk, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The lesson had been learned: true authority lies not in fear or contempt, but in justice, dignity, and recognition of the humanity of others. A few weeks later, at a general meeting, she spoke. Montgomery Enterprises has always had incredible potential. What we have experienced in recent weeks reminds us that every person deserves respect and consideration. We will never be a company where humiliation and contempt reign. We will be a company where dignity, humanity, and courage are rewarded. The employees applauded, some with emotion, others with newfound pride. Vanessa knew the transformation would never be complete overnight, but the path had been paved. Humiliation and spite had been replaced by respect and an awareness of each person's true worth. Thus ended Montgomery Enterprises' most significant chapter. A director who remained invisible for a week had changed the fate of her company, revealing that truth, justice, and dignity always triumph in the end, and that the humiliations inflicted on others are always seen, even when no one believes they are observing them. Vanessa, sitting at her desk, gave a small smile. The battle had been won, not by anger, but by patience, insight, and quiet justice.